Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dentist's Coffee Time. You know, we talk a lot about the perfect smile, but have you ever stopped to think about what that really means? It feels like it should be simple, right? But there's this really fascinating gap between what dental experts are trained to see and what the rest of us, most people actually notice. So today, we're going to dive deep into the science of smile perception. We're going to put your eyes to the test, and then we'll see how all of this theory plays out in a pretty remarkable real-world dental case. It's going to be a fun one.
All right, so let's start with a baseline. Take a look at this. I think we can all agree this is what most people would call a beautiful smile. I mean, everything just looks right. It's well aligned. The color is fantastic. It's balanced. It looks healthy. This is pretty much the gold standard in aesthetic dentistry. It's what we aim for. But, and this is the big question, what happens when a smile isn't quite this ideal? How far from perfect can you get before people actually start to notice?
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. I mean, what if those tiny little flaws that we as dentists might completely obsess over are, well, completely invisible to everybody else? It makes you wonder, where does that line? Where do we draw the line between fixing a genuine problem and just chasing a level of perfection that maybe nobody else can even see?
So to get some real answers, we're not just going to go with opinions. We're going to turn to a really fascinating study. What these researchers did was brilliant. They took an ideal smile, kind of like the one we just saw, and they digitally introduced very specific, measured flaws. Then, they showed these slightly off images to different groups of people to pinpoint the exact moment a smile stops looking attractive. It's pretty cool stuff.
Okay, so how do you even measure a smile scientifically? Well, they broke it down into these 8 key aesthetic factors. We're talking about everything from crown length and width, the angle of the incisors, all the way to things like the midline, the gum line, even the distance from the gums to the lip. By isolating and just tweaking one of these variables at a time, they could get super precise measurements on what people actually notice and, just as importantly, what they don't.
And who were the judges in this big perception test? Well, they had 3 very distinct groups. First, you've got the orthodontists, the specialists with those hyper-trained eyes for alignment and symmetry. Then, you've got general dentists, who see a little bit of everything in their daily practice. And finally, you have laypeople, just everyday folks with absolutely no dental background. And believe me, the differences in what these 3 groups saw, well, that's what makes this whole study so revealing.
All right, you ready for this? Let's dive into the results. And we're going to put your eyes to the test right now with a couple of examples pulled directly from the study. Let's see how your perception stacks up against the experts.
Okay, first up, the dental midline. So, you know that imaginary line that's supposed to run right down the center of your face, passing perfectly between your 2 front teeth? Yeah, that's the one. It's always been considered a cornerstone of a symmetrical, beautiful smile. But is it really?
So have a look here. The smile on the left, that's our control, perfectly centered midline. Now look at the one on the right. The entire upper set of teeth has been digitally shifted a full 4 millimeters to the side. Now 4 millimeters is not a small amount. We're talking about the width of maybe 2 pencil leads put together. That's a pretty noticeable change, right? Or is it?
So I want you to take a really close look at that smile on the right. Can you clearly see that shift? And here's the more important question. Does it actually make the smile less attractive to you? Go ahead, make a mental note of your answer. What do you think?
Okay, ready for the results? This is where it gets absolutely fascinating. It took that full 4 millimeter shift before even the highly trained orthodontists, the specialists, rated the smile as less attractive. But here is the real kicker. Both the general dentists and the lay people, they didn't notice it at all. A 4 millimeter error had literally 0 impact on how attractive they found the smile. Think about that. A flaw that seems huge on paper was functionally invisible to most people. That's just staggering.
Okay, let's move on to the next challenge. This is something we see all the time, a very common aesthetic concern, the black triangle. It's also known as an open gingival embrasure. But basically, it's that small, dark gap that can sometimes appear right at the gum line between 2 teeth.
All right, so look at these two. On the left, we've got a smile where the gum line perfectly fills that space between the teeth. It's seamless. On the right, a 3 millimeter black triangle has been digitally added right between the 2 front teeth. So looking at that, at what point does a gap like this start to become a distracting flaw for you? When does it start to bother you? And boom,
This one perfectly illustrates that perception gap we've been talking about. In this case, everyone did eventually notice the flaw, but their thresholds were totally different. The orthodontists, they flagged the smile as less attractive once the gap hit just 2 millimeters. But for the general dentists and the laypeople, that gap needed to be 50% larger, a full 3 millimeters, before it started to bother them. It just goes to show you, specialists are simply trained to pick up on these things much, much earlier.
So look, this is more than just a fun little perception test with pictures. Why does this gap, this difference between what professionals see and what patients see, why does it matter so much in the real world, in a real dental office? Well, let's take a look at a clinical case where these principles are absolutely front and center.
This right here, this is a situation we see quite often, and it's a really challenging one. This patient was born without their lateral incisors. Those are the teeth that are supposed to sit right next to the 2 big front teeth. So instead, their sharper, more pointed canine teeth have drifted forward into that space, and you can see it creates a pretty significant aesthetic imbalance. The shapes are wrong, the sizes are wrong, it just doesn't look right.
Now there's a really elegant solution for this problem. It's a technique called canine substitution, and it is a masterful blend of orthodontics and restorative dentistry. Basically, the goal is to move that canine into the right spot, and then artistically reshape it to trick the eye into thinking it was a lateral incisor all along. It's a bit of dental magic, really.
So how does it work? Well, the process is kind of like a multi-step dental dance. First, the orthodontist uses braces to get that canine into the perfect position. Then, the restorative dentist comes in and acts like a sculptor, carefully reshaping the tooth, grinding down that pointy tip and slimming down the body. And then finally, they contour the gum line to create that soft, natural curve that you'd expect to see.
And this is where those perception studies we talked about become so incredibly important. Just look at the gum line in these before and after shots. On the left, that's the gum height right after the tooth was moved into place. On the right, after a minor procedure, you can see it's been perfectly sculpted. The research tells us that while a patient might not even notice a tiny little asymmetry in the gums, a dentist absolutely will. And achieving this level of detail, that's what's key for a truly professional, high-quality result.
I mean, the artistry involved here is just incredible. This illustration shows it so well. You see the original, wide, pointed canine, and then you see the target shape of a delicate lateral incisor. Transforming one into the other takes immense skill. You have to remove just enough enamel to get the look and the function exactly right, all without damaging the tooth. It's a real balancing act.
This whole process, from understanding the science of perception to actually applying it in a complex case like canine substitution, it really brings us to a much bigger idea. An idea about beauty, about perfection, and about the true role of a dental professional. In fact, one of the research papers we looked at asked this incredibly important question. It says, does correcting small gingival asymmetries serve an aesthetic purpose, or is it just overdoing it? Think about that. When we know that a patient might not even notice a tiny asymmetry in their gum line, does it really make sense to put them through another procedure to correct it? It forces us to ask, whose standard of beauty are we trying to meet here? The patient's or our own as professionals? And really, that's the big takeaway from all of this. The perfect smile, it isn't some objective formula you can just plug numbers into. It's a subjective ideal, and it's seen differently through different eyes. Sure, a dental professional's training gives us this heightened sensitivity to every little detail, but the true art, the real skill, is in bridging that perception gap. It's about understanding what the patient values and delivering a result that they feel is beautiful, whether or not it meets some textbook definition of absolute perfection. Which really leaves us with a final question for you to think about. In today's world, with digital filters and all these flawless images everywhere we look, what does a beautiful and healthy smile truly mean to you? Is it about achieving flawless mathematical symmetry? Or is there actually more beauty to be found in character and maybe even a little bit of individuality? We would absolutely love to hear what you think, so please share your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. This is Dentist Coffee Time. Bye-bye.